Alright, so assalamu alaikum again. Alright, so I don't know, something just happened with the computer there. So let me know inshallah if you guys can see if it's working. Hopefully it should be fine now. Alright, just let me know in the comments if sounds okay, if the image is fine as well. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so let's continue then from where we left off. So, A'udhu Billahi Minash Shaitanir Rajeem. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, like we said over here, when Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, He brings evidences. So, the evidences that He brings might be different depending on who's being addressed. Right. So, sometimes if, for example, like the addressing is for someone who's very intellectual, who requires like rational arguments, Allah brings evidences which are very rational. And sometimes the evidences will be more sort of like observational, right? Observational evidences, and evidence can be in various forms. So over here in this verse, this is verse number 80, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ نَارًا, the one who made for you and you only, lakum, الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ, green trees. So this whole concept of green tree, now in Arabic, when you say the word shajar, this word is actually used for all sorts of greenery. So all sorts of greenery are usually called, like from the small tomato plant all the way to the massive, the giant trees in the world. These are all known as shajars in Arabic, right? So shajar is like just a term that's used for like plants that grow out of the ground, right? This is the term that's used for them. So ash-shajar al-akhdar, the green trees. In other words, the one that's the same Allah, the same being that brought you into existence, created you from a clot of fluid, a drop of fluid from a clot. The same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the same being, is the one who created for you the green tree. Yeah, and He made from that green tree, He made fire. جَعَلَ لَكُم مِّنَ الشَّجَرِ الْأَخْضَرِ نَارًا فَإِذَا أَنْتُم مِّنْهُ تُوقِدُونَ. And all of a sudden, you are using that as igniting fuel. You're using it as fuel to burn. So what does this basically kind of like mean then? Now, if you think about this, if you have a tree that's green, right? You cut down trees, you use the wood of the tree, and then you burn the wood, and we see this around the world, across the world. People are generally use wood to burn, and it's been something that's been used as a fuel for as long as man can remember fire. I mean, nowadays we also use other fuels as well, like coal is used and other things are used as well, but wood is still used, right? So this idea of the green tree being something which is primarily used as for human beings as a material for fuel, for burning, and this fire itself, this in itself should be something that we need to think about ourselves. So maybe it's something that you guys can put in the comments as well. That why is Allah mentioning to us that He has made for humans in green trees fire? Like, what's this got to do with like connecting it back to this whole concept of Allah bringing something from the dead? Yeah, giving life to the dead, right? So what's the whole connection with this? So first of all, whilst you guys are answering that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about this concept of fire in the Quran. So the concept of fire in the Quran, nar, is used in the Quran for many times. There is reference to nar being used for the hereafter. The fire of Jahannam is called nar as well. The nar of Jahannam, the fire of Jahannam. This is called nar as well. And nar in the Arabic language has also been used for like worldly fires as well. Yeah, so like when you kind of like light a barbecue or something, or even light a fire in your house. This also called nar as well. And it's also been used for metaphorically, as in to start a war. Yeah, كلما أوقدوا نارا للحرب. Every time they try to ignite a fire for war, أطفأها الله. Allah extinguishes it, turns it out. And it's also been used for an example where the Prophet ﷺ has been mentioned, according to many of the Mufassirin, as being the one who ignited a fire. مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا. Yeah, the one who gave fire as well. Right, started a fire and everything around it illuminated. So this idea of fire having sort of like multi-purpose is something which now we understand in our society as well. That we as human beings will find it extremely difficult if we didn't have fire in our society. I mean, if you think about it, just from a fire is something that is used for heating, right? And the Quran talks about this as well, right? So للدفء يستدفئ, yeah, لكم فيها دفء. So dif is also found in like animals' leather, and it's also found in fire as well. So fire is something that helps people seek warmth as well. Some parts of the world, human bodies, they can't cope. So without fire, humans would die, right? Because the temperatures are too low. And so, I mean, like there's a certain place in Siberia where the temperature drops to below -50 on a yearly basis in the winter. So you could imagine how important, fire is as a warm. Fire is undo, yeah. For the cyclic process, the hydrocarbons from the ashes go back into the earth. Excellent, very good. This is a very good point. Yeah, where we have this sort of like concept of fire, and then so fire, warmth is one thing. Fire as a light as well is very important. So you can imagine, like for instance, like electricity is a sort of like a form of fire as well. It gives light, it illuminates things. Scholars, if in the past, if it wasn't for like lighting candles, many scholars wouldn't be able to write their books. Many of them, would write their books at night time, where they would use the light. This is a second benefit of it. Fire is also used as a means of war as well, a tool for war, fighting fire with fire, and the Quran mentions this as well. Like we said, أوقدوا نارا للحرب. So fire is also used when it comes to warfare, very powerful. Fire is also used for cooking food as well. So foods generally around the world, people generally, I mean, I would say maybe most of them use fire to cook as well. So even if it's a hot country, the fire is also used to cook as well. And that itself is also something which is very unique to human beings as well. Fire is undoubtedly one of the most essential blessings from Allah, from cooking food to running vehicles as well, definitely. Fire considered greatest inventive year. So when it comes to, like, for example, like the fire over here, why it's mentioned. So Allah in the Quran has alluded to, or has touched upon, this whole concept of how important fire is in our society. But the greater sort of like thing for humans to think about is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given human beings the ability to be able to create fire. Yeah, so humans have there must have been some guy in the past who first came out with this idea of fire, who found fire, right? We don't know how it was. We don't know whether it was something that was inspired by God, by Allah, and definitely we believe that is the case. Just as in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends down a crow, a raven, to go and show the two sons of Adam, or the son of Adam, of how to bury the dead when his brother was killed, when he killed his brother. Yeah, so this, sometimes humans learn it from other things as well. And so this whole concept of fire itself is a very important thing for, human. Historically, you'll see humans have tapped into this energy, and this energy changed the course of humans forever. Humans, you could possibly say, this was the thing that possibly changed, was the game changer for human beings from all other creatures on earth. So all other creatures on earth were roughly the same as human beings, in the sense that they ate, they lived, they procreated, they hunted. But fire was the game changer. This is where things started to change. So therefore, fire coming into play is a very important thing for us to understand. And this also goes into the idea of how humans have the ability to be able to reason, to think, to understand, yeah, how does fire come from one thing from another. And nowadays we know through science that there is a whole science behind combustion. The idea of combustion, things can now combust, not just simply where you have, this, so like, you know, like a very primitive method of starting a fire where you have two pieces of wood and you rub them together and you create heat and then that creates the flame. Nowadays you have various other ways. Yeah, you have like chemicals and you have sparks and all other things that can be used for igniting a fire as well. Sacrifices burned, weren't they? Yeah, sacrifice. So it has been used for a lot of negative things as well. Yeah, in Islam there is no sacrifice. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not commanded us to make any fire in Islam as a ritual practice. Right? You won't find any ritual in Islam totally from purity to the end where fire is used as part of the ceremony. Nothing at all. And other faiths, they tend to use this, where Ibrahim alayhi salam was thrown into fire. Just wondering, fire was known from the time of Prophet Adam alayhi salam. We don't know. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. We have no like mention of this in the Quran, and we have no like narrations that can corroborate this as well. So how does this fit in? So like Yaseen mentioned about the idea of the fire, it kind of like becomes ashes, and then from those ashes that things come back again. But there's something actually more profound in this. So there's two things Mufassirin have mentioned. One is the idea that trees themselves are things that humans burn. In the sense that if you think about this, like a tree is what? It's green, isn't it? You'd never imagine something that is green, that is so fresh and so alive, so to say, that would combust, that would burn, right? You never imagine that. But that same tree that gives us fruit, and the same tree that gives us shade, and the same tree that people use, plants that they use, this same thing can become like ashes as well, that can be burnt as well. So it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is indicating towards how sometimes you might not be able to see something, but just because you can't see something, it doesn't mean that thing can't produce something else. So in other words, like this whole idea of just because you can't see the reanimation or the reconstruction of human beings after they're dead, it does not mean that it doesn't exist, right? So if humans, for example, didn't know that trees can be used as fuel, right, that doesn't mean that this concept is wrong, right? Or believing in this concept is wrong. The same thing goes with other things as well. There might be other forms of energy out there which we might consider, if someone came out with it today, or a theory of it, we might consider it to be absurd, but it doesn't mean that it's considered to be wrong itself. So this is one interpretation, that the green tree, meaning the tree that you never expect to be something that could produce such heat and fire, can combust and burn. The second tafsir that some of the scholars have given is they talk about certain types of tree in the world which have very like burning properties, right? That actually, if you rub them together, certain types of trees, barks, that they would ignite and cause a fire. Yeah. So this also is something out there as well, which is how things work. So I mean, I don't exactly know the names of these types of trees out there, but there must be some. I'm sure if you Google it, you can find certain types of trees that are known for having this property. Now, there's two other explanations which I've kind of like sort of like have come to my mind. Now, I don't know if they are applicable to this verse or not, but they are very plausible. The one is, for example, like the idea of, like we see in rainforest, when we see in forest fires, what tends to happen is sometimes they deliberately light a fire, they burn trees deliberately in order for them not to burn and spread and cause havoc. And this actually is beneficial, because what this does to the tree is this actually kills that current tree, but it allows that tree to grow new again. And this process of trees regenerating, this is also something which has the similitude with this idea that just like humans can be regenerated, even though they seem to have become ashes and crumbled up and ramim, like that guy was saying, yeah, it's possible that this can also happen here. So that's one possibility that we can see over here. And the other is trees are full of carbon dioxide, very flammable. I don't know if carbon dioxide is flammable, but the other interesting thing over here, which I kind of like came across, and it's not mentioned in major tafsir, but just a thought that came to my mind, is that why is the green tree mentioned? So the tree is only really green because the greenness of the tree kind of like explains the health of the tree. And we know that trees generally, they take in carbon dioxide and they release oxygen. And the oxygen, as we know, oxygen is the kind of thing that actually causes the fire to burn more. And in the past, people may not have known this. They might not have understood the concept of gas, oxygen, of how oxygen could cause this. But if you think about it, nowadays firefighters and all these people, they know about the dangers of like what do they call it, when the fire like sort of like collects in a room, and then all of a sudden when a bit of oxygen is given to it, it explodes. Forgot the name. Back is it called backfire? So this is also something which we understand in today's times, that the whole point of having those extinguishers, fire extinguishers, is that the fire extinguishers produce carbon, which actually like cuts the oxygen supply to the fire and then turns it off. So الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا. Backdraft, jazakallah khair. Definitely backdraft. Yeah, so backdraft is also something that we understand. So you see, when we look at these verses, it's not that people in the past have understood everything about this verse. It's possible that many of these sort of like observational verses, universal observational verses, these are things that even in the future people might start to understand, more refined understanding of why this particular word was used over here, why this particular sort of like concept was used in this verse. And so let's go back to this then. الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا. The one who made for you and you only, by bringing the lakum forward, it has the meaning of exclusivity. من الشجر الأخضر نارا, the one that has made this nar for you. فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. Yeah, فإذا أنتم منه توقدون. That all of a sudden you are توقدون. أوقد يوقد, it means that you are igniting. So there could be like I said, there could be two sort of like understandings of what is the point of bringing this verse after that previous verse. One could be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating here towards this idea of, this is how things work in the world. Combustion and then regeneration. Yeah, things will combust and they will regenerate. That's how things work. And, subhanAllah, how the tree sort of like is able to survive even a fire and regenerate itself. This is also something for us to think about. That just because we can't understand how the human body after decaying can be resurrected again. I mean, in today's science, with today's sort of like modern understandings of science and the theories that many people are coming out with, scientists are even, trying to figure out how to regenerate a human being just from their genes. Yeah, just from a little sample of them. They're trying to figure out, they know it's possible, it can be done, but they don't have the technology to be able to do it. So if they believe that a human can be regenerated, as long as you know the sequencing of the genome, you can regenerate a human being again. The second link that we can see with this verse and the previous verse is the idea of, like we said, Allah has given human beings the ability to be able to like think about things, to simulate things in their mind, understand concepts. Understanding the concept of how to ignite a fire might seem very like primitive and basic, but in reality, if you think about it, why can't all other animals do this? What's missing in the other animals? Like if you try to sit an animal down and try to explain to it how to light a fire, maybe you might get a monkey or something here and there that might be a bit abnormal in the sense that it's a bit different from every other monkey and it can light a fire, okay. But you don't get like this idea of being able to teach this to other monkeys or being able to create a whole theory or concept that they can go and apply at a mass level, whereas human beings can do that very quickly. So in other words, if human beings are able to use this, shouldn't they be thinking about who gave them the ability to do this? Why are they unique in this? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give human beings this ability, why don't you think that Allah has the ability to be able to bring them back to life on the Day of Judgment? Okay, so there's so much in these kind of verses, there's so much to think about, so much to unpack, that when you start to go into these verses, it kind of makes you appreciate more when you start observing the world around you. Yeah, and the reality is that people who deny things in Islam, in reality, they're not really thinking about life. Either they're not thinking about life, like Fir'aun, for example. Fir'aun denied Islam, but Fir'aun denying Islam is something which his denial was because he was, like Allah says, وَمَا وَمَا أَمْرُ فِرْعَوْنَ بِرَشِيدٍ. Fir'aun's like way of life, his amr, his sort of understanding was not rationally guided. It wasn't right. So sometimes when you see certain people who kind of deny Islam, or they say that Islam is wrong, if you sit them down and you talk to them, right, and you kind of explain certain things to them, they will be able to understand the concepts in Islam. Like, there's nothing in Islam that's absurd. Nothing at all in Islam that's absurd. It makes sense. You can explain every single thing. I mean, concept of the oneness of Allah can be explained. Like, it's not a concept which is so absurd that someone who is a PhD level graduate of a top university in the world would not entertain that argument. Like, we see them arguing and debating with Muslims. Why is a person who is so highly qualified in the worldly sense, why is that kind of a person debating and arguing Muslim academics in concepts about Islam? Why? Because it's something which qualifies, and something which is something that can actually be discussed at the academic level. So we should never feel, when we read these verses should give us confidence in Allah's words. It should give us this understanding that, look, whatever atheists or ex-Muslims or whatever they want to call themselves, they say against Islam, in reality we know that these people are ignorant of the reality of the universe. The more you learn about yourself, the more Islam is going to make sense to you. This is how it sort of works. And examples of this is, I'll give you an example of this. One of our teachers, I remember, he mentioned to us, he said there was a Hindu, right, in India, and there was a scholar there, and the Hindu was a very intelligent man, okay, and he said to the Muslim, he says he doesn't believe obviously in the resurrection. So he goes, how is it possible that your God, your Allah, can retrieve your entire life's sort of actions and sayings in a book? How is that possible? So the scholar was also very intelligent as well. And he said to the Hindu, he goes, okay. He said, if I gave you a pen, and I gave you paper, and I gave you ink, this was on the olden days, and I told you to write down everything you can remember from your life, would you be able to do it? So he said, yeah, I can do it, but I would need lots of paper and I need lots of ink. He goes, fine. If I gave you all the ink you needed and all the supply of paper, would you be able to write down everything you remember from your life? He goes, I'll probably struggle, but I could, write down from my young age everything I can remember about myself. He goes, okay. So he goes, how much would that fill? He goes, it'd probably fill, there was a big room, and he says, probably fill this entire room or more, yeah, with everything. So he said, okay, that's fine. He goes, but before you wrote all of this, where was all this information? Wasn't it in your head, in a small place in your head, right? So the guy goes, yeah. So he goes, if all of this information that you can remember about your own life can be retrieved from the smallest part in your head, don't you think that Allah, the creator of the entire universe, the one that created man, has the ability to access this, and not just access your mind, but have a greater access to information and retrieve all of that, of everything that you've done in your life? So the guy was gobsmacked. And this is what happens. This is when sort of people who are against the truth, anyone who is against the truth, they become partially blinded to arguments. And this partial blindness we see in the Quran many times. Fir'aun, Iblis had this. He's the first. You got Fir'aun who had this. You had many people in the past nations who had this. Many people amongst Bani Israel had this. Many people even amongst the Christians and the Jews that we see when, the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when he debated them, they had this as well. So this partial blindness to the truth, to the haqq, this is the dangerous thing in the world. This is what causes in the world so much problems in the world, because there's the reality, but there's people out there who are deliberately ignoring the reality and kind of like, trying to manipulate what they understand to be reality and feeding it to the people, like doing a Fir'aun basically on other people. You go around, you create your own version of reality, you ignore everyone else's, and you can't even debate your reality. Like your reality seems extremely absurd. Like the policies you're coming out with, the laws you're coming out with, sounds very absurd, but your reality to you makes more sense than the reality of Allah. Right? So this is why when we read these arguments in the Quran, very important as Muslims that we sort of like appreciate how the verse has been sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it educates us more. It gives us a better position when we're trying to see the reality of the world, and we're trying to explain Islam to other people. We understand where we're coming from, right? Rather than just using like these verses, then there's no emotion in there, there's no like anger in there, there's no sort of like becoming very insecure. No, we have nothing to become insecure about. Our religion, alhamdulillah, is the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, we'll stop there. Okay, you spoke my mind. I was going to say they can already regenerate human organs. They still need something from the creation of Allah. Stem cells, yeah, definitely stem cells. Humans have a need for venerating something or someone or something in the absence of recognizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Direct their veneration to created beings. We are wired to worship, be Allah or men or women. And definitely, and this is the thing. Like I was mentioning earlier on, this idea of human beings needing this, like being able to use their rational thinking is very, very, it's very important for us to be able to tap into our rational thinking. Now, like I said, not everyone, you're not going to be using your rational thinking everywhere in life. Like, sometimes you need reason, sometimes you need rhyme, right? Sometimes you need the academic, the sort of like the sciences, sometimes you need the arts, right? There needs to be a balance in life between the two. Otherwise, humans cannot live like robots, just everything on reason, right? Sometimes we compromise reason in certain things, and that's fine, nothing's wrong with that. But what we're saying is when we are like trying to understand Islam, we have to use reason. Reason is a very important aspect of, and like many of the scholars of the past, the fuqaha, reason, like the Hanafi fiqh, this is what the Hanafi fiqh was sort of like based upon, which trying to understand the underlying reasons behind the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how everything is legislated. What does tuqidun mean? So tuqidun is from the word waqada, waqad, which means fuel. So awqada yuqidu, it means to ignite, right? To use something as fuel. فَإِذَا أَنْتُم مِّنْهُ تُوقِدُونَ. So humans are the ones that utilize the trees to be able to create these fires. And these fires obviously are like a inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has inspired humans to be able to understand how to create this. Now, they only require, like some of these kind of inventions that we have in life, they only require one person to sort of like have the inspiration, and then it kind of like spreads around the world. Everyone learns how to do it, right? It's like one of those kind of things. But this is where human beings are unique. If the same thing is done with other creatures, animals out there, animals cannot appreciate these kind of sort of like inspirations and things like humans can. Animals generally, for example, when the Quran mentions animals are normally mentioned as being like pre-programmed. Animals have this pre-programming inside of them. They know how to do things already. They don't really kind of learn off each other and then pass it on to generations. Very rarely will you find that. Animals are usually الذي أعطى كل شيء خلقه ثم هدى, like Musa alayhi salam said to Fir'aun. He's the one that gave creation a sort of like structure and shape to all animals, and he guided them, he programmed them. So animals will know how to fly, animals know how to swim, animals will know how, even to a degree, we humans have that as well inside of us, right? Humans will eventually know how to walk. Even if you left a little child in the jungle, he'll know how to walk one day. He'll know how to sort of like drink from the breast of his mother. He'll just like know these things naturally, instinctively. Spreads like wildfire, pun intended. Definitely. Anyway, Jazakallah khair, guys. I do apologize for the interruption early on. But alhamdulillah, now it should be fine. Take care, inshallah. If you have any questions, put your questions in the comments. And otherwise, if you have no questions, then we'll call you a day, and inshallah we'll have lesson next week, inshallah. Ya Allah. Jazakallah khair. Ahsan. Jazakumullah khair. Wa iyyakum. Jazakallah khair, Yaseen. Alright, guys. No questions. Barakallah fiqh, Maji. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sorry, one last question. Since animals are pre-programmed, is there any way to protect ourselves from? From them, I said. From dogs, I fear. I don't know, wallah alam. You know what, you just gotta get chased by dogs a few times, I think. And then you lose your fear, bro.